Hello and welcome to part 2 of using Notion for writers. If you're new here or if you don't know what Notion is, please have a look at part 1 first. It is the part where I explain how I make myself a writer's dashboard and what I tend to use Notion for as a writer. I started this mini-series because I think Notion can be very intimidating, and for some people it would be great to use if they got over their fear of using it. And the reason why it's intimidating and they're usually scared of it is because they see those videos of people using Notion in such a beautiful aesthetic way. And that's great. It's just not how you should start using it. I think that's an evolution of when you've been using it for a little while and you can beautify things and make them prettier and prettier as you go and as you know more how to use it, right? But initially, Notion is just a note-taking app, and that's what it is at its core. I did a video a couple years ago, I think, on making a story bible / world building bible on Notion, and then I have now made also a video more recently this year on making this dashboard for writers. So I think this time around we are gonna move on to databases. Databases are what makes Notion so good and really practical for me, so we are gonna explore other ways to use them in this video. So we are going to talk about databases today, and we have worked with a couple of databases in the past. So in episode 1 of this series, we did a book ideas page, and if you look at it, it is essentially a gallery view of a database. So you have this gallery view setting, and then when you click on it, you can open it and see elements like images, bullet points, etc. And the other database we worked with very briefly is this project status one, where we have the project name, percentage status that we worked on, and the draft status, which is a tagging system, so you can select different things and say that it is outlining instead or shelved. Let's start with a new page, and we're gonna create it into my useful links box out. So I'm just gonna do /page in this gap, and this will be writing tasks. That's what we're gonna call it. So I'm just gonna go back and move this to sit within my useful links. So I just want it to be here. Perfect. I will change the icon so that it matches the rest. I'm going to go in icons, and it is writing tasks. So is there like a task icon? Yes, I think this one is cute, this checkmark circle, and we'll put it in blue so it matches the rest. Okay, so if I click on writing tasks, this is going to be our new page. And let's say you want to plan out all of your different tasks as a writer. So we are going to do /database inline, so that it's within this new page that we've already created, and we could link it to an existing database, but this is going to be a new one, so we're going to click on new empty data source. There we go. The database requires a title as well, so we're going to call it writing tasks as well, but we don't need the double titles. We're just going to then click on hide title. I would like it to be wider, so I'm just gonna go here and do full width and small text, and you can also change serif or mono. I quite like mono in general for my writing stuff, so I'm gonna keep that. And then let's make up a couple of tasks that you want to do, let's say within the month. Let's say you want to draft new scene in project A, and I'm gonna open this up a little bit. Let's say you also want to revise scene 23 in project B. Let's say these are all different tasks that you want to do. I tend to not really need these icons, so we'll click here on this little A in front of the name, and I will untoggle the show page icon. There we go. I'm just gonna expand it so they all can take one line each. We are gonna give it a status because that's gonna be the main thing that we're gonna use as part of our task system. We're probably going to want to say not started, in progress, or done, right? these are already set up, but we can change them. We can change the names of them. You can edit property here. Let's say, for instance, you want to change the way that this is, and you want the in progress stuff to be purple and to say doing. There we go. And you want the not started stuff to be red and to say to do. There we go. And so now your status is these three things. It's to do, doing, or done, which are quite short and snappy, so maybe that's what you prefer. I'm gonna change it back. Let's say this is what we have in terms of status. And let's add another property and say, for instance, you want to have a select menu, and that's going to be your tags. So you could say this is drafting, and that's how you want to tag anything that is about your current drafting. Let's say this is about betas, so you want to add a property that says beta, and let's say this is revising or editing. I'm just gonna change the color to blue. And finally, you're rereading a draft. Let's just say rereading, and we are gonna maybe change the color to like green. There we go. You have this table view, and you can add as many properties as you want. So in your writing tasks, you could open the task itself and give it a little bit of description. So you're drafting a new scene and you want to describe what you're doing. Let's open the revision tab and say that your plan for revising, you need a to-do list. So like / to do. And this is going to give you a to-do list, and you can say in my revision, I want to change A to B, and then you can like tick them off, etc. Right? So that's something else you can do with your writing task table. And then you can add a bunch of other properties. So you could have some text and say you want to describe more about the specific task. You could have a number, and you could say this is the amount of time I estimate this is going to take me. You could also have, I think, what would make the most sense would be a date. Let's add here date, and let's say you're doing that task on the 7th of May, you're doing this task on the 13th of May, you're doing that one on the 22nd, and you're doing this one on the 28th. For instance, these are the items that make the most sense to have in a task database. But now let's add a view. So in your database, you can add a new view at the top here. You click here, and then I would select a board view for this, because in your board view, it's going to automatically put it as not started, in progress, and done. So your board has these three things, and you can move them around by dragging them. So say draft new scene in project A is now done, you can drag it to done, and it's now sitting in here. In your settings, you can also change what you're viewing. So in your property visibility, you can also select, for instance, you want to see the select box that we added in, the tags. You can click here, and suddenly you can see underneath your little card the little tag that you've added. I think we should name it something, a type of work, type of task. There we go. So in your board, you can now see the type of task. This is a betas task, this is drafting, this is revising, etc. You can also add other properties. In the visibility, you could say, I want to see the date, and then it will tell you the date that you're supposed to finish it. I don't think that that's very useful here, so we're going to toggle that off. That's a second view that I think is very useful. A third view that would be useful for writing tasks is probably a calendar view. So click on calendar view, and again, you have exactly the stuff that we've already worked on, and because we added a date in our table format here, you then have the date appearing in your calendar view. So do not click on Manage in Calendar, because that's the Notion calendar, which is different from the calendar view of a database. In this view, I have set up my calendar to have Saturday and Sunday all the way at the end like this, because I'm European and that's how I like to view my week. My week starts on Monday and ends on Sunday. I know that for a lot of Americans especially, your week starts on Sunday and then you would finish it on the Saturday, I think. That might be the default setting, I think, anyway, so you shouldn't have to change anything. But I think it is in your actual Notion settings. If I go to my settings, in preferences, in language and time, you have start week on Monday, and I've toggled that on. And that will appear in all of my calendars that are in Notion. So if that's toggled off, it should be week on Sunday, and then if that's toggled on, you would have your week starting on Monday. In the calendar view, you can do the same thing as what we were doing in the board view, which is dragging items. So let's say you're realizing I'm not going to have time to finish this task then. I'm going to move it to the 9th instead. So you can drag this. And then the other thing you can do is expand so that we can see more things in your property visibility. So in property visibility, I want to see, for instance, the status, and I would like to see the type of tasks that we're dealing with. And then you can see them in your little card. You can click on your card and it'll open in center peek what is inside this card. Similarly to what you had in the table, except it was opening it in side peek. So it's just the same page. There you go. So I'll close it again, go back to calendar. The other thing I wanted to see is the full title of each task. So I'm going to go back to the settings and I'm going to go in layout. And in layout, I'm going to toggle wrap page titles. Oh, there it is, the page icon I don't want to see. So I'll toggle that off. There we go. The next thing that we can do as well is, say instead of seeing, you know, whether we're in revising, drafting, etc., I just want it to be in color. So I'm going to go back to property visibility and I'm going to toggle that visibility off. So it's the type of task. And instead, if I go to conditional color, I'm going to add new color setting and I'm going to say the color setting is going to be the type of task. And then suddenly they're highlighted in the color of the type of task that we had. But let's say instead I want to see the conditional color. Let's delete this and add a new color setting and put it as the status. And then you can actually see in green the tasks that are done, in blue the tasks in progress and not started, etc. If you want to add more things that you can see in your little card, you would have to add a property. So say I'm adding a property here and I want to add a little bit of text and I want to describe the task. So I'm just going to say description, nice. And in the description, I'm going to say blah, blah, blah. There we go. And then say I want to see that, you can go back here and say property visibility, description, and suddenly we see, oh, blah, blah, blah. There we go. So that is our first type of database that can be useful for writers. Our second database that we're going to work on is a writing tracker. So I don't think we're going to need to create a new page for this. We can stay within the same page and we're just going to do another slash here and we're going to do database inline again. This every single time starts as a table format, which is fine for what we want here. So we'll just do new empty data source and we're going to do writing tracker. And let's say this time we want to keep the title because our main page is called writing tasks and this is different. This is going to be a writing tracker. I have seen other people using writer trackers to track their sessions whenever they are sitting down to write. And so each page is going to be a writing session. So writing session 1. Let's say we want to add icons for this and we'll just go in here and do pen. And we'll just do this one in, say for instance, yellow. And in here, we're going to want to add properties as well. So our properties are going to be probably more number based. So I would add a first number, which is going to be, let's say time. And that can be the amount of time we have worked during our session. So let's say our first writing session, we worked 30 minutes. We're going to call it minutes. And that way we know that the number represents minutes rather than hours or anything else. So say we've worked an hour, that would be 60 minutes. Let's say this session was 45 minutes, for instance. Let's say you want to calculate your word count instead. I would also go to number, and then I would change the name to word count. Okay. And your word count, let's say you wrote 500 words. There we go. You're probably going to want a date for each session. So you would add a property again and add this date property. Let's say this was on the 1st of May. Let's say this one was on the 2nd. And let's say this one was on the 3rd of May. There we go. So we have our dates. Let's say I want to know the total minutes I have worked on, and I'm going to track the entirety. So I'm going to go to the property, and I'm going to go to calculate, and I would want to go into not count, more options, sum. This is going to give me the total of minutes. So it tells me I've worked 135 minutes, and I can do the same for word count. So here, this has now appeared at the bottom. So let's calculate and do more options, sum, which is great. That's what you want to get here. But let's say instead of the sum, you actually want to know your average. So instead you click here, and in more options, you can do your average, which is going to tell you on average you've been writing 613 words per session. Another thing you might want to add is, for instance, your mood during this writing session. So you could go to select and call it mood. There we go. And in here, you could say this was feeling motivated, for instance, and we'll want to have that one in blue. And then you could say during this session, I was dragging, I was unmotivated. Let's say this was painful. And we're just gonna set that one in red. And then let's say this one was average experience, so we'll maybe put it in green or yellow. Let's say yellow. There we go. And then you can track your mood for your writing sessions as well. In your date, you can also include the time, and if you do that, that might allow you to then realize, oh, I was more motivated because it was 9 a.m. for instance. So let's say you wrote at 10 a.m. and let's say in this session include time, you wrote at like 3 p.m. Let's say in this session, you wrote, let's say 11 a.m. There we go. And now you might want to track your mood based on the date and the time. Then another property you might want to use here is going to be a formula. And with this formula, what we're going to do, we're not going to dive too deep into the formula world of Notion because it is a lot more complex than what I know and what I need to use, but this can be useful in some instances. So in the formulas, when you're in edit formula, you can go in the properties and you have some built-in ones, you have some general formula examples. So we could want to check if your word count has been met, and maybe you have a goal for each session. So you could say, if we're going to want to get the word count here, so select word count. If word count is above or equal, which I think is how you type that, yeah, above equal to, let's say your goal is 650 words per session, comma, achieved, comma, not achieved. Oops, there we go. I think that's how we do this formula. And then, yes, and then that works. It tells you your word count is below 650 words. We're going to change the name to goal, writing goal. There we go. If under 650 words, it is not achieved. If over 650 words, it is achieved. So if I change here to say you wrote 657 words, suddenly it says that you have achieved. You could also make this more visual by adding a property, another formula. We're going to do word count divided by your goal. There we go. So we've done word count divided by your word count goal, which is 650. And then in the formula at the top here, we're going to edit the property. And we want to visualize this. So we're going to do, for instance, a bar. And the number format is going to be a percentage. And we're going to want to do let's say blue, for instance. And suddenly it tells you your 76.923 into your goal. This is a very long number. We might not want to show everything. So in the formula, first of all, we're going to say like goal tracking. There we go. In the property, you can also change the decimals because there's a lot of them, and we can just say 0. And that way we just see 77% because it's rounded up. So you could show it like that. There we go. You can also show it as a ring if you want instead. So having the bar is pretty cool. You can also say, I don't want to see the number. I just want to see how close I am to achieving my goal. And that way you can just see, okay, this is visually where I'm at. I think it's a little bit more useful to see the percentage, so I would still have it, show number, percent, etc. There we go. I think these are all the main things I would personally want to have in a writing tracker. So this would be enough for me. But you can also hide some of these if you don't want to actually see them constantly, even if you're keeping track of them. So say your date is automatically created. Maybe instead, let's change the property for created time. And it shows you when you've created this, right? We can change this back. You want to maybe have a calendar view of this, etc., which I've shown you how to do this here. So you can do all of the same sort of things, but that's kind of the idea. Let's say we want to do an outline or a reverse outline database, which is one I actually generally use. This is my reverse outline database that I am currently using for Rules of Survival, which is my sci-fi space horror novel. And it has a table view. It has a status view, which I don't really use, so I could delete this, and it has a calendar view. So that's the main thing I have been using, and we're just going to recreate a little bit of it, but it is pretty simply done now that you know how to make tables, etc. It just has a lot of elements. So going back to my writing, we are just gonna create a fake project, and we're just gonna create it into outlining. There we go. We're going to create a new page. Let's create a fake project. So we're just going to call it project fake. There we go. Project fake is going to have an icon. Let's go here, and we're just, oh, I like the magic wand because it is fake. So let's just put it in pink. That's pretty good. If I go back to my writing dashboard, it sits over here in my outlining, and actually, I might make it orange because that is the color of outlining. And we're gonna make it full width, small text, serif, mono. In Project Fake, we're gonna have several databases. So I'm just gonna make a little dashboard for it. So all I'm gonna do is create 4 columns. And in this first column, we're gonna do, this is how I like to set up my projects, sort of like Rules of Survival. I like to have prepping, outlining, writing, and revising. So let's say in the prepping section, we're gonna have a couple of items. So we're gonna do heading 3. This is gonna be prepping. I can't write. This is gonna be prepping. And we're gonna add a space, and we're gonna color it and make it orange. Perfect. And we are gonna duplicate it. So there's gonna be our title here. So these are gonna be our 4 columns for Project Fake. In Project Fake, we're gonna have an outline, and so we're gonna need a new page, and this page is gonna be outline. And if I go back here, you can add a little icon, so I can make it list, probably is what an outline sort of looks like. I like this indented list. I'm gonna make it orange as well. There we go. That should actually be an outlining. That makes more sense. But in prepping is where I would have my world building, my character bibles, etc. So we're just going to go straight to the outline system first, and we're going to click here, and in my outline, this is where we're going to do it in 2 different ways. So the outline itself, I normally work with a regular table. And a regular table is different from a database table. And you can see there's 2 tables that come up when you type it. You have table and you have table view, database. The database tables is what we have worked on right now. You have seen it a bunch. The regular table is not linked to any data anywhere. It is just a normal table. So you just have a grid of, you know, these items. We can still make it full width, small text, etc. This is what I like to work with for my initial outline. So if I go back to Rules of Survival's outline, I had my references of the type of outline that I like, which is Save the Cat and the character arc. And then I typed in the Save the Cat on the left, the character arc on the right. And then I had columns where I input all this information and started seeing the story develop and evolve, essentially. Let's say in my outline, I want to do the same thing. So I would have Save the Cat, and I would add an extra column, and this would be character arc. I'm going to select this toggle and I'm going to make this a header row so that it's highlighted as a header, and I would like this to be perhaps a bit bigger, so maybe this is bold and this one is bold as well, for instance. And then let's say here we'll have the Save the Cat titles, and here we'll have the character arcs titles. So the way that I like to outline is I like to have some information before the book starts about the character and stuff that happened earlier in the timeline of things, like before we actually start Act 1. So in my outline, I would have maybe before the book starts, I would have that here, and there would be some information, blah, blah, blah. And I would have some information here. And then maybe here I would have my wants and my needs of my characters. I would have here probably what Save the Cat calls shard of glass. And Cam Whalen calls this the ghost, which I prefer. So I would have information about my main character's ghost. I would have information about their lie and their truth. So these are the elements I would have in my outline before the actual outline. And then here we would start with Act 1. And Act 1, I might make this a different color so that it's clear we're entering Act 1. And then I would have, so we have an opening image within the setup scenes, the theme stated, and then the catalyst. So I would then have opening image, theme stated, and maybe I would have the setup scenes like above it, setup scenes, and then catalyst. And I like to match this with the character arc stuff. We had the hook, which is when they believe the lie, and I would put this here. Hook believes lie. And then we have the inciting incident, which is the equivalent of the catalyst. So I would then have inciting incident, etc. And you can also make these, so I can like go here and make this a different color so that there's a demarcation. So I could say like all of these are yellow and all of these are yellow, for instance. And now I know like this is how my table is set up. I can make these smaller so they take less space and make these bigger because this is where all the text is going, right? And this is how I would create a regular table outline. Now, let's go back to our project fake. And let's say you've worked on the book and you're now ready to do a reverse outline. So I would go into revising and I would make page, and this is going to be reverse outline. And my reverse outline icon is going to be probably another like data or something. Maybe this should be like this little spreadsheet icon. There we go. So if I go here, you can see you have your outline and then your reverse outline. In here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make it full width, small text. And then we're going to do a database table this time. So we're going to do database. We want a table view. So we're creating a new database from it, new empty data source, and we can just name it reverse outline and then hide this because we don't need to see it. And then we have our table view. My reverse outline for Rules of Survival is very full because I worked at using the story grid as a method. I also have a full video where I decide what I'm going to work on, which elements I'm going to want in there. So let's just add a couple of elements, but we're not going to do everything in this version. First of all, I want to have a name, and I think for me, the main element, the name is going to be the scene title. So we're just going to call it scene. And we're going to say this is scene 1.1. This is how I like to name my scenes. It's simply to say this is chapter 1, scene 1. So scene 1.2. We can also assign a number, which I also do like. So I'll just go in number and just leave it as like number. I can just add this back in so that it can go as small as possible. Oops. And reduce the size of this, and I would like to have it on the left of it. So this would be 1, this would be 2, this would be 3, this would be 4, this would be 5, right? Just in terms of the order of the scenes. I would keep these to add in information about the scene. So when I open it, I can then have a to-do list of things and would have item 1 to do, item 2. These would be all the things I want to revise in the scene. I would also have a description of the scene, so like a summary of the scene. And in the reverse outline, I just called it the story event. That's based on the story grid. And we would make this one a bit longer, so you have a little bit more space to play around with it. And then this is where we meet our main character. And you can take more than one line, of course. Mine tend to take 2 to 3 lines, and they're quite like, this is spanning quite a lot. I would also have a POV because I want to know if I have multi POVs which POV we're in. So would add this as a select, and we're going to create 2 fake characters. So we're going to say the main character, and we're going to say this is also from the main character's point of view, but maybe this is where we meet the love interest. And you could change the POV in everyone. You can keep this here, or you can say, I want to see the POV first. So this is going to go on the left in a column here, and that could be useful to know whose POV you're in. I also want to track my word counts. So I would go to number again, and this would be word count. There we go. And my word count is going to go at the front as well, because that's kind of information I want to know early on. Let's say the scene is 1567 words. In my word count, I would like to see a decimal. I'm just going to go to edit the property number format, and I would like to have number with separators so that I can see the comma after the first number in my word count, because they're in the thousands, and I just find that easier. You can also click here and do calculate and do more options, sum, so that at the very bottom it calculates your total word count, which is very useful to know. There is a whole thing in the story grid reverse outline and the way that you're supposed to do your reverse outline that has so many more elements. You have a thing called the value shift, and you can represent this, and here I've done it with this select menu as well. So if I click on there, you can see all the different options, and it's to tell you if you go from a negative to a positive to a negative to a double negative, etc. You then have the turning point, which is basically the moment that the value shift happens. So for instance, my main character goes from annoyed to satisfied in the first scene. This is when her clients agree to leave due to the risk that the new situation presents. So it's an action. But you have another moment where she goes from content to shocked, so positive to negative, because of a revelation, which is when she gets screenshots of what's going on Panacea. I also have a timeline just because I was struggling a bit with knowing when things happen in relation to other things. So I needed to know a vague timeline, which is why all I have is like week 1, day 2, etc. And then I have other properties that I've hidden because I did not need them anymore at this stage. But at the time I did make them, and they are, if you go in property visibility, I have a location property and a characters property, as well as a date property. So if I go to our fake story, reverse outline, let's say for instance, you want to have all the characters that are involved in the scene. So you would have a multi-select property. And this is like the tags that you have in the POV, but you can select more than one. And we're going to call it characters. And the characters are going to say like the MC is here. We want to make it the same color so that it's clear. We're going to say the MMC is here, for instance, and we're going to make it the same color. And let's say you also have the main character's mother, for instance, is present in this scene. And let's say here, this is just the main character, and here, this is just the male main character, for instance. And so you can select which characters are present, when, etc. You can do the same with location. And so that's what the story grid suggests, is to have your locations as well tracked. So you can say this is happening at their house, this is happening at their workplace, etc. So this is all very useful if you're doing this much, but you don't have to do this much. I also have a new property, which is a new word count. And this one is going to go here next to word count. We're going to reduce the size of it. And let's say, for instance, when you're revising it and you finished revising it, you want to say this is now 1650 words. Let's say because you're revising, you also want a status. So I'm going to add a new property and we're going to go status, and we're going to move it at the very front because that's the first thing I want to see. So I'm just going to also reduce that and like this much so we can see it. And let's say the scene is done, this one is done, and this one is in progress, and the other two are not started. Another element you might want to have is when you're working on your scenes. So I'm going to add a date property, and we're going to click on the date here, and we're going to say, I worked on this on the 1st, I worked on this on the 3rd, and it's in progress, so we're working on this on the 4th. We want to finish it by the 5th, so we're going to click on the 5th, for instance. And let's say this one we want to do it by the 7th, and this one we want to do it by the 10th of May. I don't want to see the date here, but I'll be using them in our next view, which is going to be our calendar view. So then I go to settings, property visibility, and I'm going to unclick the date property here, so it disappears. However, one thing that's annoying is I have more and more properties and my table's only so big, and every time I have to scroll back and forth. So another thing you can do is up until which column you would like to see at all times. So let's say you just want to see the number and the scene name. You click on it and you're going to click freeze. And now, if I scroll, you can see that you always see the two on the left of that one that you froze. So they've become sticky and you can see them at all times. But now that we have a date property and that we've set up some dates for when we want to do these scenes, we're going to add a new view, which is going to be our calendar view. So here we go, calendar. And it's automatically creating it and asking you some questions in this new view. I think we're gonna say, let's show the page icon, let's scrap the page titles in case they're too long, and we wanna see the calendar by date, by month, we wanna show weekends, and we're happy to open the pages in center peak. So all of that is good, and we can close this. So we now have a view of when we're working on which scenes, or by when they're supposed to be done. I would love to see more information, so I'm going to click here in settings and I'm going to do property visibility. I would like to see the status of the scene, and I would like to see the word count as well as the number, because I want to see which scene number we're in. And you can move them around and say the number should come first right under the name. So that's the first thing we're going to see, and then whether it's done and the word count comes underneath. You don't really need to see anything else, but then let's say you want to have a better visibility of what's done or not. There's two things I've done in my reverse outline. The first one is change the icon next to the scene title for these little squares. So we have a large white square, and we're gonna add one on every single one. Let's say we've worked on these two scenes, so we're gonna click this one and change it to the check mark. Here we go, check mark. done. And the other thing I want to see is a little bit more visibility on what's done, what's in progress, what's not started. In terms of color, you can also do that. Go to settings, go to conditional color, new color setting, and we're going to make it based on the status here. And so now your cards are going to be green for done, blue for in progress, and gray for not started. And you can move them around. Say you're like, oh, this is going to be in progress for 2 more days. I'm going to finish on the 6th. I'm going to drag this scene over there. And so I don't think I can finish this entire scene by then. So I'm going to drag it over there. And I think I'll need another day for this one. I'm going to drag it over there. And that's it. This is the most useful reverse outline way for me to work with, just because I really enjoy being able to see these things. And I like being able to click on the scene and see, oh, okay, I've done these items. So now my to-do list is complete. And you can also add, which I did initially use, the board view, which allows you to see the status of your scenes. But I don't really use it that much because I find myself using more the progress status on the table view or the calendar view instead. So I'll just click on here and say this is now done, click on it, done, click on this, check mark, done. There we go. One more thing I want to cover while we're in this section is that you can reuse the same database that you've already created. So say for instance you want to see your reverse outline as a table and then you want to see the calendar view below it. You can do /database inline. And instead of creating a new one here where it says new empty data source, we're going to look for the one we have created, which is reverse outline. And let's make sure this is the one we've just created. I think it is, right? And instead of this view, we can change it to the calendar view. There we go. And so you now have your same database. There's a little icon there to say that it's backlinked to this one, which exists. And I think you can still hide the title so you don't see this and you just see calendar. And you can see your calendar underneath your table format. And it's the exact same database. So you have access to the database you've already collected and made. In any new database you create, you don't have to create a brand new one every single time if you're repeating the same information and using the same data. The next database we're going to make for Project Fake is going to be a story timeline. Let's say you're in the middle of drafting and you're getting confused by the timeline events of what's happening to your character. So we're just going to create a new page as usual. And this is going to be called story timeline. I'm going to add an icon, small text, full width. This will require a new database. So as usual, database inline, and this starts with a table format as always. We're just going to call it Project Fake Timeline, and we'll hide the title. There we go. So let's say you know which events and which scenes you have. So for instance, we're going to call this story events, and we're going to have the first one be the MC arrives in new town, and that's going to be our first event. And then let's say the MC meets the MMC, the male main character, and then let's say MC falls into a ditch. I don't know. Let's say these are our 3 events happening in this story. We're then gonna add a property, and obviously this is going to work with real dates that exist. So if you're just trying to do this to visualize a timeline and it doesn't matter, you can just put whichever month, whichever year you want, but it has to be real. So in the date section, we're going to add, for instance, the MC arrives in town. Let's say this is a story that happens in January. So we're going to go back to January of this year, and we're going to say she arrives on the 6th. And this might take space, this story event might take space over a couple of days. So we're going to add an end date and say that this finishes on the 8th. And then they fall into a ditch on the 10th, and we'll do the same end date. There we go. Now that we have 3 dates, we can start our new view, which is going to be add a new view timeline. And we suddenly have a timeline view of what's happening. You can show the table on the left of the story events that we've made up, which I think is quite useful. And let's just close this. And you can now see, oh, I didn't change the month. Okay, so I need to change this to be, this is happening on the 9th of Jan. and it finishes on the 9th of Jan. There we go. Our timeline will make more sense now. You have these little arrows that take you to the date you've just set up if it's in the past. So I'll click on here and it takes me to this date. The only thing that bothers me is that they appear in reverse order, and I would like them to be in descending order instead. So I'm going to go sort by date, and now it's going ascending, so it starts with the first date and continues with the next one. You can also add icons to these. So for instance, they arrive in a new town, you would have maybe town, cityscape in blue. They fall into a ditch. Let's say it's with their car, so we're gonna put the car icon. And let's say you're like, okay, I actually think this is happening too quick, I want to move this, so you can then drag it to the 12th, and you can see they meet the MMC afterwards. So if you move it to the 14th, it suddenly appears underneath it because you've selected the ascending order of dates. Let's say the arrives into a new town event, you want to take more time to talk over it, so it's going to be longer, so you can drag the beginning or the end of it, and I'm going to drag it to take place over until the 10th, for instance. And there you go. This is your timeline, which I think is super useful for some story events to plan out when things happen and to make them realistic. I have been using this in one of my projects, which is in an office for monsters. If I go there, I have my timeline, and you can see they're pretty terrible because I was writing this in 2022, so I have to go back all the way to 2022, and each of them have an emoji, but it's basically like Rose goes to the pub and you have this little drink emoji, a bad day, and then she takes the job, and then she waits for news, then she has the video training, then she has drinks with the girls, and it just helped me visualizing how long things took and when they would take place, and oh, there's Christmas, I need to know this, etc. So I thought that was pretty useful. And obviously you can keep it on the timeline view or swap to the table view if you want to add more properties. You can also add elements like, for instance, the POV that this is in, and then you could add the MC, and you could add the MMC, for instance, and then in your timeline view you can go to property, visibility, and you can add the POV as well, and suddenly it's tagged onto in this end. You can also change the conditional color then and say there's a new setting and you want the color to be based on the POV. So now you know that all of these scenes are in the main character's POV and all of these scenes are in the male main character POV. So all of these can be useful. The next type of database we're going to use, you have seen before, but we'll just show it briefly. It's going to be gallery views. We're going to go into prepping and say we want a character base. We're just going to go /page, build a new page that we're going to call characters. We will do a person, like a little icon of a person, and we're going to put it in orange. This is very much the exact same thing as for world building. If you're doing a world building Bible, like a story Bible, and you want to have a bunch of cards, we'll do the same thing. Let's start directly with a gallery view. So we are going to do / and then gallery view of a database, and we shall say new empty data source, and we're going to call it project fake characters, and like usual we're going to hide the title. And this is where our gallery view is going to come in. We're going to have several pages, so let's do a new page for each character. So let's say this is our main character, and we'll plan on having a bunch of items in there. And let's say this will be our male main character or love interest or whatever. And we then have 2 cards for 2 characters. Now, if you start typing and say, I'm going to want to do like a heading 3, for instance, and say that this is going to be backstory. And in the backstory, I'm going to have some bullet points, blah, 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 blah. And then let's say I have another heading 3, and this will be appearance, for instance. I'm going to also change these to have a color. So this is the initial dashboard database that we have about this character, right? We can then see that this is appearing in the card because the card is relative to the content. So we want to make this more aesthetic so that our character's story Bible database is a little more visual. We're going to go in settings, and we're going to go to layout. And in the layout of the gallery view, we are first of all going to turn off the page icon, unless you want to keep it, which feel free, but I like to toggle it off for this. In the card preview, instead of page content, we're going to say page cover, and then we're going to go and add some covers. So in here, you can then go at the top and do add cover and change it, and you can upload anything you want. So you have a gallery of items that are already there. You can upload a picture of your character, you can link it to an existing page somewhere on the web, and you can use Unsplash. So let's just do upload, and we're gonna upload a file and say this is gonna be our main character. We're gonna move it down by repositioning and move it to like see her face, for instance. There we go. And then when I click off, you can see this is what's appearing. Let's do the same thing for our male main character, and we're gonna do add cover, reposition it so it's more starting at the top, and here we go. This is our cards. We can also change the size of the cards. So in the layout section as well, if you click on card size here, you can make it small so that you have a bunch of them, or you can make them large so that they're huge, frankly. We're going to keep it at medium. You can fit media so you see the entirety of the image, but I think that's pretty ugly, so I'm not going to click that. And if you wanted to have imagery inside of the card instead of the cover, you could do that and then click back to page content instead of page cover. You can also change how the pages open. Instead of center peak, you could say you want side peak. The default for the gallery view is center peak, but you can move it to say like it's going to open on side peak or full page. So if I click on this now, it opens on the side. And you can also make that smaller or bigger so you can work with more area. That's it for characters. You could also have a list view if you want. It's not the most useful view of databases. I pretty much never use this, but let's say you want a list view of these characters and they'll just appear in a list format, and that's it. If you have some more properties, like for instance a tag, and say this is the main cast, for instance, and you could have like a secondary cast, and this is going to appear in your list if you wanted to. So like here, the tag is at the very, very right end of this page. So let's say the main character should also be the main cast. There we go. And you could add more properties and they would appear in your list. It's not very useful. In your gallery view, when you open it, you'll have your tag at the top as well here in this peak. There are two other views of databases we've not used and I never ever use, but you might want to use. So we're just going to run through it very briefly. In the prepping section, let's say you want to collect a bunch of ideas for your novel on the go. I would then create a new page and we're just going to call it project fake, and these are just going to be notes. I'm just going to move it above because I think it should go in the order, and that would be something you would do first. Let's do like this bookmark thing. This is just going to be a collection of notes that you take on the go as they come in. So we're going to do a new database, but we're directly going to go with feed, and this is going to be a feed view of a new database. This is going to be notes for project fake. We're going to hide this title, and in here we'll do, okay, new page. I have this sudden idea number 1 that I think it should be the main character falls into a ditch, and you can see that it's appearing like a feed view, the same way you would have on social media. This is my real name, don't worry about it. So it would then appear with the name of the person who came up with this. So you could collectively have several ideas with other people if you were co-writing a book, for instance, and you could have a feed view of it and see who's made this note. So that could be useful. So let's say you have a second idea and you're like, this is idea number 2 for this. I want to add a property which is going to be when I'm creating this. So like create, nope, that doesn't come up. Create a time, and that tells you when this note was created. And then you can just have this feed view and see them in the order in which they have arrived, right? You can also change the order in which you see things, and you can sort by created time, and you can say instead of ascending you want it to be descending, so that the last ID and the last node you created comes up first, for instance. So this could be one way to use the feed view. And let's say you want to see the same notes as a list format as well, so you can see your different notes, and then you have like ID number 1 and ID number 2, and then your feed view of the same thing. Let's say in revision I'm going to create a new page, and we're going to do beta readers feedback, and we'll do an icon, and we're going to say like check mark. I think that would be good, like a little this maybe, and we're going to do it in orange, and here we're going to do another feed view, and in this database we're going to call it beta readers feedback, hide the title. Let's say you want to make notes of every single time you have feedback from a beta reader, so new page, we're going to say like item number 1. Let's say here I want to not show the author byline because we don't care about that. And let's say you want to add in a new property to this item. So I'll click on it, and I'm going to say that I want a check mark. Where is that? There is one and I don't see it. Checkbox, there we go. Checkbox, and we're going to call it done. And we're going to create a new item. So we have chapter 2 feedback, and we're going to change this to chapter 1 feedback, for instance. And let's say that this is done. We can click on done, and here we can add a view in the filter. So in filter we can say we want to see done, whether only things that are unchecked, and that way we can see only the remaining items. You can add more than one filter, so you could say like I want another view the same, so feed view, but I want this feed view also to not show the author byline, done, and I want this one to have another filter, and I want it to be done, checked. So then you can change the name and say done, and this one rename not done. And now you can have your list of different items and see in your feed the different things that come up and say not done, done, etc. This is the other way I would use the feed view, but again, you can pretty much do the same thing with other types of databases, with the status, and move it along a board. You can do that in a list, table format. You can do that in other formats than this one, and I don't partially see the need for this one, except maybe for note taking, if you're on the go and you really want to create a new note every single time. Finally, the last database view that I never use, and it's brand new, but that could be useful if you're writing contemporary stuff and you want to track, say, a character's goings, and you want to know where they're heading to, if they're doing like a road trip or whatever. So let's go, for instance, into story timeline, and in our story timeline in the table, let's add a location, which is place, and it has to be this one with this little icon. So let's click on that, and we're going to say that this is happening, let's say this new town is Shrewsbury in England, and let's say that they meet the MMC in London for some random reason, right? Now you can create a new view, which is map, and on your map view you're gonna have a live map of the locations that you have mapped out. So we have Shrewsbury, which is somewhere over there, and we have London, which is over there. And I think that's all you can see. Style-wise, you can make this large for the map so you can see more of it. But I think that's pretty much it. And when you click on it, you have the card opening. So yeah, you can have a map view of things. For instance, if that's useful in your story timeline, that's where I would use it, but I've never used the map anywhere else. So, and that's it. This is all the different database views that could be useful for you. I think the only one we haven't used is the form, which I can't really see a use for myself right now. If I were planning something like a wedding, maybe I would want to use it to be like, hey, what are your food preferences and allergies or something? But other than that, I've never used the form. I think knowing how to use databases is pretty much the most essential part of Notion, and it is very much what I use the most in my and it is definitely what I use the most as a writer. So I would recommend learning databases, playing around with them, seeing what you can do, probably looking online at other tutorials if there's anything else you want to learn about them. There's some things we've barely touched upon, like formulas and roll-ups and things like that, which you can do a ton with if you really want to do more like Excel sheet type of things, but I don't really think it's necessary as a writer. I use that only in my finance trackers, but not in my writing. If you enjoyed this little lesson, please consider subscribing to my channel, because I will definitely do more of these Notion tutorials for writers, and I hope that these are very useful for you, because I find it very fun to try and explain and figure out how others could want to use Notion personally. So on that note, I will see you guys in the next one.